Hi guys, it is April from Getting Hogo With It. Today I'm here to share with you my March wrap up. I read 5 books in March. I had a lot of 4-star reads, so it was a good reading month, but I did have one dud. So I wanted to share them with you. Let's get into it. Yeah, it was not a bad reading month. Slow-ish. I'm now at like 5 books a month where I used to read like at least 6, usually like 8. But life, my mind is occupied with other things. So the first book I want to share with you is a 4-star read, and it's When Hitler Stole Pink Rabbit by Judith Kerr. This is children's literature, but it's actually like an autobiographical novel. This follows a young girl living in Germany. Her dad is a prolific writer, and he realizes that he's very much in danger in Germany during World War II because he's very outspoken about his views, and the Nazis don't like that. So he really quickly leaves one night. He goes to Switzerland, I believe, and they join him there. And it's about them living in Germany at that time and then where they go from there. I really thought it was interesting because Judith Kerr, it sounds like, had a kind of similar experience in her own childhood, and you could really sense that this was written with that in mind. Like a lot of the time with World War II fiction, I haven't read a ton of World War II fiction from the perspective of a child, but it really shows you that, kids are, yes, aware that something is going on with war, but they also have their own stuff going on in their own lives, and those things are all really important to them. I really, really enjoyed this. I think this is a great book to read to kids about World War II. It's not overly, it's upsetting, but it's not like a shock to the system. It introduces it very cleverly, I thought, and I really enjoyed it. So I read that for middle grade March. This was the only children's lit book that I had read for March, which is a shame. I'm still on hold for Sweep. I also went on hold for The Wolves of Willoughby Chase after listening to Simon from Semetary talk about that book. So I was like, oh, for sure I'll read like 3 middle grade for middle grade March. No, that didn't happen, but I read this one and I really liked it. Another 4-star, and this one's a thriller. I read Everything You Want Me to Be. This feels like an eon ago that I read this. I listened to it on audiobook and I really, really enjoyed this book. Honestly, the writing really drove this storyline. It was good writing. And that's not something you always get in a thriller. It's very hit or miss with writing in thrillers, I've found at least. I don't know about you guys, but I was totally drawn in just alone by the writing style. This follows a young girl named Hattie who is in high school. She feels a bit like an outsider in some ways because she lives in a very small town and she's like, I want to move to New York City. So she feels like she doesn't quite belong. And she is found dead one day, and we go backwards in time and we follow Hattie's storyline. We also follow her English teacher's storyline, and you're trying to find out who killed Hattie. I will say that I was not in any way surprised by the ending. There were a couple of twists that I didn't see coming, but I wasn't surprised by the ending, but that really didn't stop me from enjoying it. Sometimes it's not only about the plot twist, it's about the journey of getting there. And I don't really mind if I know or I have a very sneaky suspicion of who's done it, as long as I'm enjoying the ride. Honestly, if I am not enjoying the ride and then at the end I just find out who did it, I sometimes feel like it's a waste of time. So I really liked this. All that to say, I really like this, and I'll be definitely picking up more by this author, that's for sure. Oh, I forgot to mention that I gave this 4 stars. Another 4-star read for me that shocked me, like very much shocked me, was Pet Sematary by Stephen King. I've only read one other Stephen King before, and it was It. And that was just okay for me. I found his writing style not flowery, just it just went on and on and on. But with Pet Sematary, it was a shorter book, and I feel like he really got to the point, and there weren't all of these like crazy other storylines all the time that didn't have a very important purpose. All of the storylines in here had a real purpose, and if you don't know what Pet Sematary is about, it is about a family who moved to this little small town. The dad is a doctor, and he has the opportunity to work as a doctor in this town. So they move, and they have 2 kids, and they move to this house that's on a super busy road, where a lot of pets sadly die because it's a busy road. A lot of pets die. So they meet this neighbor across the street who is informing them about this. But the curious thing about this town is that you can actually bury your pet in a certain cemetery, like a certain portion of the pet cemetery, and the pet will come back to life, but they'll come back slightly different. They won't be like their sweet, loving, normal self. They'll just be a little bit off. They'll walk strangely. They're not like zombies, but they don't eat people, but they act dumb like zombies in that way. I was hooked with this book. I was very surprised because this is much more about grief than it is anything else. And there's really nothing terrifying that happens until the very end of the book. And I liked that. Like, I was there for the ride. And it was, I will say it was quite sad. Like, I'm not going to give any spoilers, of course, but it is a book about grief. And so we walk through that with this family. There's just like a couple of things that drove me slightly nuts about Pet Sematary. And I'm being nitpicky, and that is their dream sequences. We are following the father is our narrator essentially, and he has a lot of times where he's like, am I dreaming? And he talks about dreaming all the time. And then there was a dream sequence in here a little later on in the book, in the second half of the book, that actually angered me. I don't like it when there's a dream sequence where they're like, and this happens. But no, it was a dream. You know, I just think it's lazy writing. And I was surprised to find it in this book when everything else was so good. So there was that. There was also some sex scenes in here that I don't love sex scenes in my books. I usually want them to have a very specific purpose. Otherwise, I find them incredibly silly to read. And yeah, there's a few sex scenes, but one of them was just absolutely ridiculous. And really went into great detail about how his wife was pleasuring him. And then he's like, I went to like pages of detail about that. And then there was like, oh yeah, and I pleased her too. And I was like, probably not. So I didn't really like that at all. I find it so cheesy. I just really didn't enjoy the sex scenes, and I don't know, I found them cringe-worthy, if I'm being honest. However, the rest of the book, so much fun. So much fun. Okay. Are you ready for my 2-star? This was the book that I chose from my March book haul from 2018. So I was going back, had to choose one. I chose The Valley of Amazement by Amy Tan. Now, I enjoy Amy Tan's writing, but this book just really didn't do it for me. In this book, we're following 2 generations of women. Lucia actually owns a brothel, essentially. And then we follow her daughter, Violet, and she becomes, she's separated from her mother quite suddenly, and she has to become a courtesan herself. And I found it very frustrating that at the beginning of the book, you're really following both storylines. And then all of a sudden the mother is gone for a very long time and you don't know anything about the mother's history or anything at all until the very end. And by the end, I no longer cared about the mother. And I wished that throughout the book they had thrown in some information about what happened to the mother, even the mother's history, all of that. And I really didn't get that here. I also didn't feel like there was much of a connection between characters. I felt like they weren't close. There are several characters in here who Violet, our main character, should have been incredibly close to, and I never ever felt like they were like number one in her life or even number two. I never got that vibe. And that really frustrated me. I felt like character development was obviously something that was lacking here, for me at least. But this is done fairly well on Goodreads, I think. For me, this was definitely a 2-star read. I was not impressed. And it'll be going off of my shelves. It's also huge. I think I'm learning that for my book haul revisits. I'm going to have to start picking smaller books because, I don't know, it didn't seem worth it. Oh, sorry to say, it didn't seem worth it. Okay, and then the last book that I read in March was another one that I absolutely loved in the end, and that is Educated by Tara Westover. This was also a surprise to me because I started it and I didn't love it. At the very beginning, we're following Tara Westover's actual life. Like, this is nonfiction. She grew up kind of in the middle of nowhere, off the grid. Her family didn't put her into schooling. No one went to hospitals if there were like emergencies, which there were emergencies in this book. Nobody went to hospitals. At the beginning, when Tara Westover is very young, she's writing about her very young self, and there's so many interruptions where she'll tell you a story that happened, and then she'll be like, actually, this is just how I think it happens. This person said it happened this way, and that person says it happened this way, but this is just how I remember it. And while a lot of people have said to me, because I've voiced this opinion before, a lot of people have said, like, she's just being super careful and super thorough, and I appreciate that, but I just wish that was a little asterisk, and then we could go to the bottom of the page and read that end note about how it's not necessarily exactly the truth. But I just wanted to read about her story. And when that happened, it would always take me out of that experience. So I was really not enjoying it at the beginning. And then I kept reading. And as she grows older, of course, her memories would be something that she could lean on a little bit more and understand more. And so fewer and fewer of those moments happened. And then you just got absorbed in her story. This is about Tara Westover's very awful childhood. Her dad was not healthy, and her brother abused her. He was terrifying. He physically abused her, mentally abused her, and it was absolutely horrendous. And I just can't imagine going through that. And she's come out the other side of it, and was able to get educated. She went to all sorts of universities and got herself an education. One thing that I do have to say is I wish that she had written this in like 10 years from now, because I don't know how young she is. She was born in 1986, so she's 5 years younger than me, which means that she is 31 or 32 years old. And I did feel like this was still very raw to her, that this experience in her life is still incredibly raw. And I think if she had waited just a little bit more time, she would have been able to get a little bit of perspective. Honestly, I would be perfectly happy to read another version of this story in 10 years, if she ever wanted to revisit that, I think it would be interesting because it just felt really raw. And I mean, that is also a really wonderful gift to give readers because it's, you know, major vulnerability here. But I still feel like she's working through stuff. I guess that's what I mean by it. By raw, is she's still working through a heck of a lot. And I'd love to see her perspective on everything in a few years, 10, 20 years. Like, it takes a lot of time to absorb what happened to her. But yeah, I gave that one 4 stars, and those are all of the books that I read in March. I read some really great books. I'm really, really happy that March happened because, yeah, I've been having a kind of, well, slower reading year, that's for sure. And I haven't read a lot of 5 stars, so I'm really happy I had this reading month. Let me know in the comments below what the best book that you read in March was, and I will talk with you soon. Okay, bye guys.